welcome back to Mormon Sex Info. This is your host, Natasha Helfer, and I am so happy to have an old friend and colleague, Sue Bergin, on the show tonight. I've been wanting to have her on for a while. We're not on for great reasons, but she went through a termination at BYU back in February, I believe. Is that correct?
It was December, actually.
December. Yeah. Okay, well, I guess news broke about it in the Salt Lake Tribune in February. And so we're going to have a discussion about that. But before we go there, I just want to remind everybody that this is, a podcast that depends on your donations. So please go to mormonsex.info if you would like to support the podcast. Those donations go to support things like editing of videos and audios and helping me pay my staff to do those kinds of things, paying for the website. It's not like this podcast makes tons of money, so it's barely sustainable, but we'd like to keep it sustainable. And so if this subject matters to you, then as far as educational topics in regards to sexual themes that impact the Mormon community, and Mormon is the wide spectrum of everything, from Orthodox to post-Mormonism, we would love to have your support. And if you can't support us financially, then we'd love for you to support us just by sharing posts or supporting us, by letting other people know about the podcast. And subscribing. All right. So having that out of the way, Sue, it's so nice to see you.
Good to see you, Natasha. Natasha. I have a niece named who says it Natasha.
Well, that's okay. I don't mind. I don't care. Everybody in the South calls me Natasha. Including my dear friend Sam Young. He loves to call me Natasha, so it's all right. I don't mind. So it doesn't matter. I loved running into you at the gala the other night that was in regards to what was Latter Gay Stories gala in regards to artwork with the Miracle of Forgiveness book that has been turned into artwork in support of the LGBTQ plus community. So that was really touching and profound, and it was so nice to see you there. So why don't we just get started by you telling us, well, one, just a little bit about yourself. I don't know how many people know you. I think you are well known in the community in certain circles, but not everybody knows who you are. And a little bit about your history, and especially your history at BYU. And then also kind of just what happened this past year.
Let's see.
That's a lot, I know.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I grew up, I was born in Provo when my parents were BYU students. I was raised in New Jersey till the age of 15, and then back to Provo for my dad to teach at BYU. So I've been an on and off Provo Orem resident for many, many years. Went to school in Chicago, at UCLA, also at BYU. So I've had my share of time outside Utah, but my family and everyone is here. So I settled back here about 20 years ago. And I worked for BYU starting when I was 26 as a PR writer and spokesperson. And so I had some pretty deep experience with some depth about the campus environment back in, this was 1984 to 83 to 87. Then I moved to LA and did other things and came back. I did teach adjunct at BYU for a total of 12 years, with a break in the middle to be a hospice chaplain for 10 years, and then adjunct teaching. And I had been teaching for 5.5 years in the Marriott School, teaching advanced writing in the business school, and was informed at the end of December 2021 that a position I had applied for, that I'd been encouraged to apply for, that had been signed off by all the levels at the Marriott School, that I was not cleared for hire. So that means that somebody found something that they did not approve of, and they were not going to let me move to that position. And they also said she cannot go back to teaching. So my time at BYU was ended. So some would argue that's not technically being fired. That's more of a decline to renew your contract, which is the accurate wording. But when you've been there for a total of 28 years, including my time as a student employee, and your contracts have always been renewed automatically, basically, it's a firing, it's a termination. I think everybody would agree that's the sense of what happened. Because I was being moved to this new position and everybody wanted me to do this, and I wanted to do it, and it was a compliment to me to be asked to do it. I knew that my performance was fine with my department and my college. And I also checked with my bishop to make sure that my ecclesiastical endorsement was up to date. And he said it was, that he had just been asked to re-up it, and he had. So the only thing that I could think of, and that I still can think of, and that has been confirmed through some, over time, you start to hear from people, well, I've heard this, I've heard that, and the consensus is very strong that I was seen as an LGBTQ advocate, and that was not wanted on campus. That's the basic story.
Yeah, so to be clear, I mean, you've been working there for years. Your direct administrators and department were fine. You had never received like, like a reason for like discipline or suspension, or
Never.
You weren't like on one of these like, let's make sure that for the next 6 months, things are okay, or
I had never been spoken to about any problem ever.
Mm-hmm. And on top of it, you'd been encouraged for this promotion of another type of role that you might play.
Yeah.
So your direct superiors were not involved in this decision.
No, they weren't, and they were quite upset.
Yeah. Okay. Well, having been there for 28 years, what can you tell us about just kind of the climate that you've been noticing? I mean, it's no secret that Elder Holland spoke last fall at BYU to the faculty and kind of people who work at BYU. I don't know if you were present necessarily that particular evening, but I'm sure you're aware of that talk. And even before that talk, I feel like the climate just in general with the church has been climaxing, it feels like to me, in regards to anti-LGBTQ sentiment. Feels like it's been climaxing in regards to the more rights they tend to get in the government, the more we seem to kind of be digging in our heels from a theological perspective and a cultural perspective in the church. What can you tell us as far as just the climate with the faculty?
It is super mixed. I mean, there are so many people at BYU who really want our queer brothers and sisters to feel welcome, loved, involved, included, and in relationships and married if they want, in same sex. There are many who feel that way. There are many who don't, who feel that is, against God's will, that's against the prophets, that's against, all the arguments. I don't even like to say them sometimes because they're so wounding. So there's this big mixture. And when that talk happened, when Elder Holland's talk occurred, I was not there. I did listen to it. The next day, I had conversations with people saying, so I have a rainbow on my office door signaling that I am a safe person, or a safe space, however you want to put it. Does that mean I need to take this down? Am I being asked to take that down because there was some information about pride symbols and flags and things not being okay? And in some departments, I understand there was some pressure to take those kinds of things down. In other departments, there has been none, and they all remain. I asked a student the other day in the drama, I believe in the music department. So in the big, the performing arts building, nothing, no, not taken down. All those symbols are still there. So it's a mixture. It really is. And the signals are mixed. And I think they're trying to control, but not look like they're controlling. And there, of course, are people at different layers who feel different levels of obligation to anticipate what the brethren might want. And so if they're in a position to enforce something they think is being said, they'll go forward, and others are much more, and it's a mixture. But definitely there was a change in tone after that talk, that we all have to be a little bit more on our guard about what we say and don't say. And this is our employer, they pay our paycheck. On the other hand, at the university, we want robust discussion around controversial issues so that these students can do their due diligence as young adults. This is their developmental period of really figuring out who they are. You can't freely choose something unless you are free to talk about it and explore it and see all sides. And I feel worried that that's being taken away at BYU around some topics. And I think that's a mistake.
Remind me again what kinds of like courses you're teaching, right? And how is this topic maybe coming up in your,
So
yeah.
I taught advanced writing in the business school, and BYU has an advanced writing requirement. And this course met the requirement for business students or anyone from across campus who wanted to take it. Anybody, they didn't have to be a business student. And I had students from all across campus. And included in that course was a unit on inclusion and diversity. So they chose, the Marriott Business School chose our course to implement this unit, this required unit on, helping students be prepared for the workplace as far as diversity, inclusion. What are the pain points? What do you need to understand? And I always took this as a challenge to get to their hearts, to not just list like, don't say this in the workplace or you're going to be seen as a sexist. Don't say this or you're going to be seen as a racist. So I tried to create discussions that would get to their hearts about, where's your heart on this? When we say the word whiteness, does that make you go, whoa, assuming you're a white person? And I had to be really careful about not to talk as though everyone in the room is white, because so much of BYU is white. And I felt like I needed to reach them in particular. One semester, I decided to try telling those who identified as people of color. I had said any marginalized group, LGBT, people of color, and you don't have to come to this next discussion if you don't want to. Partly because I'd heard BYU students say some really ugly things about their classmates, and I didn't want these other students to be exposed to have to be exposed to that, to their fellow BYU students talking about them in racist or sexist or homophobic terms. That wasn't the best idea in the world, but I decided to give it a try. And then I did get a terrible review that semester about how Professor Bergin is prejudiced against white people. so you're it's such a delicate, and we weren't trained in how to do this. I had to train myself, and I, as much as I could, I brought in people from the marginalized groups to speak for themselves. So that's where a lot of this came in, because I would encourage this robust discussion and try to get people to face their prejudices. And I would talk about my own and how I took the Harvard bias test, and it was so embarrassing because I came out highly negative toward, I'm not even, well, I guess I have to be vulnerable here, right? I came out highly biased negatively toward African American people. This was a few years ago. And I was surprised because I'd done a lot of work on that. And I told them this. I said, it's in me. This stuff, these automatic reactions are still in me. This is why we have to talk about this stuff, because we don't even know it's there sometimes.
This is what we mean by systemic racism.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I've done a lot more further work, including joining Black Lives Matter and participating with them in various actions. And anyway, there's virtue signaling for you, which I just did. But because I'm embarrassed that I came out that way. Mm-hmm. And it's not right. It has to change. And BYU has to change about these things too. And it's working on things, and at different levels, different people are at different places. Mm-hmm. But it's a very conservative religion, and conservative Republican religion tends toward racism and sexism and homophobia. I don't know how else to say that.
It's not something we want to look at.
Yeah. And I don't mean to insult those who are conservative and not racist and not sexist. I mean, that happens. But the tendency, the trend, I think, is pretty clear.
But I also think that those who are conservative and not those things wouldn't be offended.
Yeah. Because they see it.
Right.
Because they see it. Yeah.
If you're offended, that might be part of the problem, right? I think that's because I've been offended, and I realize, that's part of the problem. The part that I'm offended at is part of my own problem. Yeah. That's when I have to do my own work. Right.
It's a signal. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just wonder, is BYU, I was so a part of it for so long, and my dad was a professor there for many years. And so it was part of my life for so long. always feel like I have an accurate idea of how it's seen outside BYU. And I just think, do active believing members of the church really want a flagship university that shuts down discussion among young adults on these topics? Is that what they want? I can't imagine that that's what they want. I mean, I know the extremists, Desnat and others, they want people like me to shut up and be fired and get out. But I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that we're having to ask this question about a lot of topics, not only in our religion and in Mormonism and at BYU, but I mean, when I look at our country, I'm kind of interested in asking this question about a lot of different things, given what we're seeing on a lot of different topics. But to your point, I mean, the Marriott School of Business is a top school of business in the United States of America. It's not like, I mean, I don't know where it ranks, but I know it's ranked fairly high. And so it's not a podunk little business school. And so they're graduating people who are going to go supposedly work for some of the top companies, and not only nationally, but even internationally, especially since we have so many people who speak, lots of languages due to missions and who even come from culturally diverse spaces. So I'm concerned that they're going to be ill prepared for some of the mission statements and inclusion types of protocols that so many companies just have in place.
Well, and to be clear, so many of my students get all of this. They get it. So many of them do, many more than when I was a student at BYU. But it's the ones who don't that, yes, are the worry. And there are a fair number of those as well, that they're in the bubble still and they don't want to be out of it. And they think that they shouldn't need to take in this stuff from the world. And it's dancing with Babylon. I've heard that phrase. And the sarcasm around the word woke, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, so you're saying, as far as the feel and the faculty, it seems like you're saying there's a bit of a split, right? There's faculty that's really concerned about the kind of the environment, the cultural environment, and then there's of course faculty that's on board.
Right. Or a spectrum.
Yeah, there's a spectrum. What about the student body? What's your pulse there?
Spectrum. My sense is that the majority are, maybe a slight majority, I don't know, I'm not, this is not scientific at all, but a slight majority are more aware and more alert to all these things and more willing to take a look, to talk about it, to consider all sides, to not necessarily take authority automatically, but that their own voice matters, their own inner voice matters. And of course, the church teaches that your inner voice matters. But then it also teaches that if your inner voice is at odds with the leaders, then yours is what's wrong.
Right.
So that creates so much dissonance for people and so much distrust of their own voice. And I've certainly dealt with that and had to work with that over the years. And still, I'm kind of resigned that that's never going to be done. But I'll keep working at it.
So when you're offering these classes and you're kind of sifting through these complicated subjects, it's not like everybody in the room is scowling at you.
No.
You're having the student body is able to manage.
Well, and each class is different. I mean, you'll have a dynamic where there's a critical mass of students who really want to talk about this stuff openly. And then you'll have another class where there's a critical mass of people who are shutting it down and, sort of giving you the evil eye or accosting you in the hallway during the break, which happened in the fall, saying after we'd had a discussion about LGBT and why are we talking about this? What, they have this is a direct quote, they have their demons and we have ours. Wow. I don't need to hear about theirs and they don't need to hear about mine.
Wow.
So that's rare. That happened once. Yeah. And that's frustrating. But I felt like I was there for the ones who wanted to discuss, and I was there for the ones who were hurting, who are in one of those marginalized groups. And I started every class with an introduction of myself, which included showing my rainbow pin and saying I'm a safe and informed place on this topic. I'm a mama dragon. I have 2 gay brothers, and I had a foster child who was trans, now an adult and doing well. And I was very brief about it, but just wanted them to know this is something I'm informed about. And I always got at least one, sometimes more than one person who privately spoke to me about themselves or a family member, sometimes a sibling that they were really worried about because the parents were not accepting and they were worried about the mental health of a sibling. I mean, just heartbreaking things, as well as sometimes people would say, yeah, my sister came out gay and everybody's great with it. And we're so, and we're navigating it just fine. It's a spectrum.
Right. Right. When your contract wasn't renewed, was that a time frame when lots of contracts were being renewed? And I mean, like, do contracts kind of get renewed?
Yes.
So were there other people that you feel that were in a similar boat as you or you just have no idea?
I haven't heard of others. So this was the end of the semester. It was really close to Christmas. And the person whose job I was taking on January 2nd or 3rd, the Monday after the plan was to take over this other job, she was just waiting and waiting. So when can I orient you? When, and we were just waiting for this final approval. It had been in for weeks and the paperwork. And finally, I got a call at home from an upset person. I don't even want to get into who, because they're suffering over this too, or have, just saying, I'm so sorry, but you weren't cleared for this position and you can't go back to teaching. And I had no warning. This is Christmas. How do you look for a job over Christmas? I'm sole support. I have chronic illness, so I was doing adjunct so I could work part-time and sort of make a living. So to find a way to make a living with no notice, and the other people who were put out because of the whole situation. I mean, there were just lots. It was a domino effect that affected a lot of people. And of course, there are other people who taught my same course who also would talk about how they love and accept and include LGBT people, and including marriage equality. Very few say that. I did say it on a rare occasion. They're all like worried now too. Oh, Sue is sort of on this more liberal side and she got fired. Am I next? I mean, a lot of people talk to me about that. I sometimes wonder if I wrote for the alumni magazine for many, many years. I was in every issue for the last 17 years. And part of me wondered if they wanted, so a lot of people knew my name. Mm-hmm. So I wondered if they wanted to make an example of a more visible person. I don't know. I'm guessing, because I got nothing written, no reason. I just got that phone call. That's it. No, they didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, the person who gave you the phone call had no explanation either.
Had no, not given anything. Not given anything.
And they were not the person who wanted.
They were not.
That news, right?
No. So yeah, it was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, and I mean, I can relate to that, because I feel like with my excommunication, so many of my colleagues feel the same way. It's like, well, we hold the same positions. Maybe we were not as vocal in these ways, but we're vocal in these ways. Or who?
Why you? Yeah. Why were you
this
targeted?
Particular person? In what ways will this happen? Where will the gauntlet come down next? Who's in trouble? Who isn't?
Why can't they just let us all be? Why do we have to have this ultra orthodoxy? I don't understand the need for that. I just don't get the need for that. I guess the leaders would say, well, this is what God told us to do. Well, I'm not buying it. So
yeah, God tells us to do things too.
Yeah.
Like advocate for our LGBTQ people. So are you comfortable sharing how, just on a personal level, how did Hollands talk affect you? Are you comfortable with that? Which, I mean, you can tell me to buzz off. So
yeah, no, I can tell. I worked under him when I was in PR. So the years I was in PR at BYU, it started with Oaks, but then very soon, no, I think all my years were with Colin. Anyway, so I had a great, and I've kept in touch with him over the years to some degree, very infrequent, but a lot of affection for him, a lot of feeling that he is on the more expansive side. I don't know how else to put it, of church issues. And so it was quite disturbing. I didn't know what to make of it. I just didn't. And part of me, I became aware that he was not from him, but from others, that he was in a lot of pain after, a lot of emotional pain because of the reaction to the talk. And part of me wanted to reach out and comfort him. But the part of me that thought, but the part won out that said, no, my heart is with the people who are hurting because of what he said. The people who are suicidal, the people who are despairing, the people who are so confused and don't know what to do with their lives. They love the church. They're committed to it. They want a relationship with a same-sex person. They need to change their gender to stay alive and to have a full life. It was agonizing, mainly because of the people I'm aware of who hurt so badly over this, the LDS people. They weren't LDS and hadn't been imprinted with all the LDS and conditioned with all the LDS ideas. And I know that's a very naturalistic explanation of how these ideas get so deeply into us. And I know there's spiritual dimensions as well. But I am going to be super vulnerable again and just say I feel that the church destroyed both of my gay brothers. One of them is dead, not by suicide, but he did try to commit suicide. He died at 29. He had been just in agony. And the other one, he's still living, and I still have hope he can have a good life, but he's had terrible addiction problems since he was 14 and just trying to cope. And the church takes no accountability for any of that kind of damage. And I don't understand that. I just don't understand that.
So this seemed out of character for you and what you knew in your relationship with him, working with him all those years. This didn't seem in character.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not knowing him myself, just from his talks, it felt out of character for me as well. Just
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts as to why that might be? Is it just kind of where the brethren are headed in regards to having to double down, or
I don't know. Who knows?
It's speculation.
I think maybe, some of the other leaders got tired of carrying the weight on this topic and wanted it spread around. So there may have been some pressure for others to talk a little bit more about it. Mm-hmm. in the terms of the more conservative members of the 12.
Right. Yeah. Goodness. And do you feel like, as you saw the ramifications of this talk, do you feel like there were people that left just because it's not compatible with them anymore? Like, in other words, there's faculty that's like, I just can't make it work here anymore? Or have you not seen that as much? In other words,
I've seen that. Yeah. I've definitely seen that. And others trying to make plans to get out, others despairing that they can't, it's too far along, their careers are too far along, they can't make a change at this point. Definitely. Yeah, quite a few stories came to me after this happened, and I went public about it, or the Tribune took it public, I should say. Mm-hmm. And I agreed to. Yeah, and there's a lot of pain over that too. I mean, people, they love BYU in many ways, and they want to stay there, but this increasingly punitive atmosphere is making it very difficult, and especially in an academic setting where people are trained to delve and ask questions and look at all sides and discuss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and then we saw not too long after that the issue with the speech therapy school, right, happening there, kind of in those similar months when your story came out. So,
and may I just say, the cruelty of that action is just beyond the pale. I just, can you imagine being in the middle of therapy at this clinic, trying to reconcile your voice to the new gender that you are trying to establish for these trans clients, and then being yanked and totally rejected? We can't, I mean, the clinic members, I'm sure, were not rejecting and extremely apologetic, but the institutional rejection, and we don't even believe you. This is a real thing, and so you're out. It's just how can followers of Jesus Christ do this? I'm not in a very good place about.
Nor should we be.
Yeah.
This is where the risks of, suicide and mental health issues, we know that the risks when people are rejected in these ways, really severe risks increase, and why we are so distraught and worried.
And I want to know what the brethren in the positions who are making these decisions, what are they saying to themselves about that? Is that just, collateral damage to a rule that we just have to hold the line on? Is that, how do they talk themselves through knowing they have to know the despair, the fruit of these policies? It's despair and death, and I don't know, am I being suicidally correct in saying these words? Help me not go over the line here. I don't want to create anything. I don't understand. That's all.
You're not going over the line. And this is where, on the one hand, we want to, obviously always be careful when we talk about these things, because people are listening who may be, obviously in tender spaces. And obviously anytime we're talking about suicide, we want to reach out and say there are resources and you matter and we want you and we love you. And at the same time, we want to draw attention to these things, because it is not hyperbole when we say the brethren have blood on their hands, right? This is not us being exaggerated. This is not us trying to draw attention or exaggerate issues. This is factual. We have research to support it. We know that non-affirming spaces increase exponentially, like by 7 to 10 times the risk for suicide.
Right.
When people, especially transgender people, feel excluded from their communities, it's an even higher risk. But, for LGBT people as well, it can be like 3 to 7 times the risk. So no, you're not exaggerating by any means. And even like you're saying, your brother who, one did deal with suicidal ideation, one did not, but dealt with other symptoms, right? Yeah. So it's sometimes we focus on suicidal risk because of course that's the most serious, but there's all these other risks, substance abuse risk, substance dependence risk.
And to be clear, lots of suicidal ideation in the second brother as well.
Right. And then you don't have to have a completed attempt or even a tried attempt to still have suicidal ideation be a constant or part-time aspect of your life. Depression, anxiety, relational risks, right? So what is it like to be in a relationship with another person? Mixed orientation marital risk, which is a very high risk for divorce and relational distress. And of course, all of these have also physiological risks. So immunity risks for immunological disorders, chronic stress, loss of years on your life. So these kinds of chronic issues can take up to 10 to 15 years off of your life. No, these are not small. These are not small.
And the impact on the family members. I'm purposely not saying too much about my brothers because that's their stories. But on the other hand, it's my story too, because it has impacted me tremendously. My day-to-day life and grief and worry and anger at institutional crap, that just hurts them over and over and over again. It doesn't how many times you say the phrase, our loving Heavenly Father demands this or commands this or whatever.
No.
When it's said without love, it's worse than if it weren't said at all.
Yeah, it's the classic kind of approach of like, well, I'm in times when people thought that certain types of discipline was what children needed, it's like, this hurts me more than it hurts you, as they're belting you with the belt buckle, right? Or, this is for your good. This is, this is how I love you. Abuse is never love. And so
Yeah.
when,
And
yeah.
I do want to say I do have friends who feel that the church's positions are loving and caring and are in the LGBT community, and I honor people's choices, and if that works for them, that's fine. It's not okay for the ones for whom it not only doesn't work, but it just decimates them.
Yeah, and this is where it gets tricky for me, I guess, because I feel like I can have people in my office who will tell me, no, I agree with my parents. I think it was and for my benefit that they beat me. I think that was for my benefit. So they have that belief, right?
Yeah.
And I can respect that belief and still understand that there's something there that isn't allowing them to really understand the impact of that at this particular time of their lives, because they're still part of that system. So I don't know. I think that we can have respect for beliefs that are still not accurate, because we have the science and the research to support something actually not being accurate at this point. Of course, these are the kinds of things that get some of us professionals in trouble with the church when we say things like this, right? But this is why it's so important, and why the responsibility of talking in behalf of a God is just astronomically important. And with how often we have gotten that wrong,
Right.
how often we have gotten what God has said wrong, I think that when we understand that there are dire statistics, we should, be humble in our ability to think, that there may be something here we may need to revisit or look at a little closer, because as your family has experienced and many others, these are not small things. So the Salt Lake Tribune picked up your story. The New York Post picked up your story. Do you want to talk a little bit just about what that was like, just from kind of journalistic perspectives and being interviewed, and what they were interested in from different kind of journalistic lenses? One of them being kind of Utah centric, one of them not so much.
Yeah. So both of them were good interviewers. They knew what they were doing. I felt good about what was written up. There were always a few things that aren't quite what I would say, but nothing that I feel like I have to correct here. The Tribune reporter, she was very because I was still going to church at that point, sort of mostly on Zoom because of COVID, but she was concerned about getting me in trouble with the church and wanted to say things in a way that I would not get in trouble. And I just said, I'm not really worried about whether I get in trouble or not. Please don't worry about that. I mean, in trouble. I'm a 64-year-old grown woman. How can I get in trouble with an institution led by Jesus Christ when I'm trying to live my life according to how Jesus taught? But of course, I understand what she was getting at. But that was interesting. The New York Post reporter, she is a student of journalism at Columbia University, which is one of the top journalism, and doing an internship at the New York Post. And she is a Christian woman herself, and she didn't really describe that at any length, but she seemed to want to get this perspective out there. Very kind. She told me that she found me because somebody, I can't remember the name of the project, but there's some project that is tracking faculty who are dismissed for free speech reasons, civil rights, whatever. And so apparently my name's on that list. So that was interesting. But yeah, I felt good about them and their approach and their interest. I was very concerned that if there's going to be some attention on me, I want as much as possible to turn it onto the issue. Mm-hmm. That my loved ones are suffering, and I want attention on that. And teenagers, children, as well as these Mormon adults who were taught decades ago that their very being is sinful and perverted and, deviant. Nothing has been done to help them heal from that kind of wound that goes to the center. And yes, the church doesn't teach that anymore, but who's helping them?
And who's even recanting those things?
They haven't even recanted those things.
No, they have not.
And the brethren, in my opinion, have a solemn responsibility to explain when things change, like the miracle of forgiveness. Yes, they took it out of print for a good reason, but tell us, provide an interview about that. We regret that this was out there for so long, and bishops were handing it out right and left. We wish that harm that had been caused had not happened. If it has happened, here's what we hope you will do to heal from that. They don't do that. They just act like it never happened, and I can't deal with that. That's not how we are asked to conduct our lives. Exactly. So
here's some monies to help you to go to the therapies that you will need to recover from these emotional traumas that we have imposed upon you.
Yes.
Yep. And here's some trainings for leaders so that they will not continue to repeat things that they learned that they don't realize have been recanted or that we no longer teach, but they are, repeating in their wards or confessional rooms because nobody's told them that these things no longer.
Right. They're still teaching that it's a choice and that, you can choose otherwise.
Yeah, no, people are still being offered really horrific advice and information in regards to so many of these topics. So goodness. Well, I'm glad that you felt that the journalism was well, represented your story well. I did get 2 questions, kind of anonymous questions. One person says, I'd be interested in hearing if Sue has an experience she'd like to share in relation to the November 2015 exclusionary policy and how that affected her.
Oh my.
I know, that's a heavy, it was such a heavy time for so many of us.
Well, I will say that the July before is when the Supreme Court decision was made. And a letter was read from the pulpit to all members from the first presidency, basically saying, yeah, it's the law of the land now, but not here, it's not. And I was Relief Society president at the time. And the bishop called, they were instructed to call a meeting. It was like the 5th Sunday, I think, and to deliver this message. And in some wards you were allowed to discuss it, and in some wards you weren't. I practically begged him to say something around it that softened the blow. Anyway, he didn't feel that he could. He just read the letter and that was it. And so then November comes and here's another blow. And I was still Relief Society president. I started considering my exit from the church at that time. I just thought, I cannot be complicit in this. I made a decision to keep on for a period of time longer because I'd gotten messages that some of the youth in my ward and a few others who were queer had found some relief in knowing there was a person in the ward who was on board with them. And I just thought, okay, I'm gonna stick it out as long as I can for them. I hope that doesn't sound too self-aggrandizing, but it was a pretty conscious decision. And to say as often as I could something about inclusion and our LGBT brothers and sisters who are hurting. That was kind of the phrase I used a lot. And I did do it up until the pandemic, and then Zoom took over and I basically haven't been back in person except to sacrament meeting a few times.
No, I think that's a very common dilemma, is that, do I stay in order to help, or is my staying, part of the problem by being complicit, right? So I think that a lot of people wrestle with that. And a lot of our LGBTQ people have different feelings about that as well,
Well,
so.
And I would like to say also that this was a new level of me working on hearing my own voice and not the voice just of authority, because I did still have that, but maybe I'm wrong. They are the Lord's anointed. They speak for the Lord. I have to be humble too. I'm asking them to be humble, but I have to be humble too. And so there was that part of me too that was torn. And looking back, I knew that my voice was the one I needed to listen to, but I didn't enough. But
Mhm.
November 5th was the beginning of really hearing my own voice
Mhm.
and hearkening to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. No, I can resonate with that for sure. You can only wonder so long if they're right when abuse continues. So
Yeah. And you see the negative impacts.
yeah, for sure. Another question is, another thing I'd be interested in is whether her feelings towards this subject, the subject being LGBTQ plus issues in the church, have come up in your writing, and whether or not you would be willing to share any of that with your listeners. I guess I didn't prepare you for that. Like, I don't know if you have anything to share in regards to.
Well, I did lobby several times. So I wrote the family focus section for BYU Magazine for 17 years until the January 2022 issue. I would have been allowed to continue that contract, that writing on a contract basis, because contract workers don't have to be LDS, don't have to. The only requirement is that you live LDS standards while you're on campus.
Mhm.
So they held that out to me that I could still do that if I wanted to. And I was like, no. I love you guys at BYU Magazine, and I do, you men and women, but no, I'm gonna have a little more self-respect and to continue that. Anyway, I did lobby several times for talking about how to support our LGBT loved ones, how to navigate that if a child comes out to you. The problem is BYU does not allow its professors to research LGBT topics for the most part. That's what I've been told. I have no official word on that, but they kind of know that that's any research that might lead to something positive, like about the parenting of LGBT people or something like that. They're not going to go near that. And all my articles had to be based from some sort of research that was going on at BYU. So that kind of eliminated a lot of possibilities. But I would try to inject that angle when I could. And I was able to a few times, but I got shut down pretty strongly a few times by the higher level at BYU, not by BYU Magazine people.
If you wanted to write on that topic. Interesting.
Yeah, they wanted it higher up. They seemed to want it, I should say.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to think now, just as in the psychology field. I mean, I've seen things come out of BYU that are kind of interesting in regards to like pornography studies and some sexual themes that have been interesting because they've actually kind of aligned a lot of times with things that I agree with. And I'm like, oh. But I'm like, see, even BYU. well, but I think, yeah, I don't know that I've seen anything in regards to LGBT.
I shouldn't say that they're not allowed to because I don't really know that, but I certainly could never find anyone, and I would make lots of phone calls trying to find someone who can speak to this topic, so I can anchor an article around your research, and I never could.
Wow, that's super interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that as well. That's really interesting, Sue.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what am I leaving out? What am I not asking you about that you're hoping I would have asked you about? Or how are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm really doing really well. I never did a huge dive like I thought I might, do a sort of I can't get out of bed for a few days kind of thing. And I never did. I think partly because I just felt like maybe this was time. It was time for me to be free of having to measure my words and having to wonder if somebody was watching what I was doing and which students were reporting on me and when that was going to come down. That stuff happens. It happens at every university, but BYU tends to take the student and parent point of view over the faculty point of view. I've certainly seen that. And donor, of course, that's not unique to BYU either. Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing freelance editing. I'm trying not to do too much writing because I would rather save my writing energy for my own writing projects, but I'm doing lots of editing. And so far I'm getting a good amount. I'm specializing, I'll just put that out there in memoirs. So I've just found that very meaningful and fun and interesting. If anybody has a memoir and they need an editor.
Okay.
Yeah.
That might be me, actually.
Good. Well, you know my editing skills.
I know you helped me edit both of my books so
Yeah.
far. So you did a great job.
Yeah, thanks.
I can speak to you personally. So I remember you editing. Well, editing is funny, right? Because you write down all your stuff and you're like, this is amazing. I do amazing work. And then you'd come back and I'd be like, what? And then I'd be like, well, damn it, she's right. I'm like, that sounds so much better.
Well, you know, you don't have an ego problem when you can do that.
That's so funny. No, you're very good at what you do. So that's good to know. What if people are interested in that, how can they reach you? Like what's
Here,
the best?
on Facebook, Sue at SueBergin.com. So I have my own.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have a website so far. I haven't needed one so far, but I'll probably eventually do one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sue at SueBergin.com.
Yeah.
We'll link to that. So well, yeah, anything else that you feel like you want to just say, or any last thoughts as far as what this has all meant to you? Or
I just I love my queer family and friends, and I want them to be happy, or have the best shot at happiness they can have,
yeah,
that like everybody else gets.
yes, I agree. Amen to that, sister. So, all right. Well, it's been lovely having you. Thank you for coming on. It's lovely to visit with you always. I wish you wonderful things in your future. I'm so sorry that you had to go through this kind of process of, like rejection, right? Because of standing for something beautiful and right, and, being an ally to people who need us to be allies.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I'm really horrified by that. And yet I think there's something beautiful about standing for truth and for righteousness, as we were taught. So
As we were taught.
So, all right. We'll hopefully catch you soon. I hope to run into you soon, Sue. So
Same here. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks, Natasha.
Bye-bye.
We took the long road home, turned minutes into miles, and as the evening traveled on, the sunset bathed your smile. We stopped beneath the desert stars, wrapped in each other's arms. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth.
A trail with tears, pain and sorrow too.
But through every storm we traveled on, like lovers do. And if sometimes we fell apart, we always came back home. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth. in every sunrise. Can't imagine life alone. Let's take the long road on together until we're gone. Want you by my side till the day I die and into the beyond. It's as simple as our love is. That's how I wanna go. All wrapped up in the arms of our extraordinary. It's nothing ordinary love. Ordinary. No, it's extraordinary.